Welcome to European Journeys. This is the seventh stage of a series that takes us to Sweden, and where in fact we look at how Sweden was Christianized. The Christianization of Sweden happened around 1,000 years ago. And today we are going to go to the south of Sweden again, but to another region than the other regions we explored. In previous stages we explored in fact the region of Skåne that you see on the map now. This is where you see Helsingborg, Malmö. And also we explored a bit more north. The province, the historical province of Västergötland, that's where you see the city of Karlstad and the lake, the major lake of Sweden, Lake Vänern. But the region we're going to explore today is called Småland, and Småland in fact covers the cities of Jönköping, Växjö and Kalmar as well. And the city we're going to explore today is in fact Växjö. Now Växjö, the last particle jö comes from jön, and that means lake in fact, because Växjö, as you look at the picture, is in fact a city that was built near several lakes, and that's quite common in the Nordic nations. Växjö is also famous for having been the place where one of the most famous Swedish scientists, botanist in fact, most famous botanist of the world probably, received his early education there. His name is Carl von Linné, Carl Linnaeus or so, he was called. And so that's where he received his early education. And in fact there's a park near the cathedral that is named after him, the Park von Linné. There's a statue in that park also in his honor. But that's not for him that we are going to Växjö. We're going to that park, but we're going to see there another statue. And that's a statue of a man with a mitre. Now, the mitre represents authority in the church, and in fact, that man was a bishop. He was the bishop of Växjö, in fact, and he is believed to be the founder of the church in the city, and that happened in the 11th century. That man is called Siegfried. Now, we talked a little bit about Siegfried in previous stage in Husaby, because he was the bishop who baptized the king of Sweden, Olof Konung, who is in fact the first Christian king of Sweden. You can explore that stage in our archive. But today we're going to explore a little bit more the life of Siegfried. Now, who was he? In fact, the information about his life are there's not so much really, but we have in fact quite a bit of information that we can explore. But before doing that, we need to look at the political situation of the time. We talked about that already in earlier stages, but it is needed to talk again about that if we want to understand the life of Siegfried. Now, at the turn of the first millennium, the three kings of the area were in fact Olof Konung, as I said, the king of Sweden. There was also the king of Denmark, Svein Fogbeard, and there was the king of Norway, Olaf Tryggvason. Now, the king of Denmark and the king of Sweden had leagued themselves against the king of Norway, and that culminated in a famous battle, the Battle of Svolder in the year 1000. That battle happened in the sea, down in the map you can see, and that led to the death of the king of Norway, Olaf Tryggvason. Now, the lands over which they ruled, these kings, were not quite the same lands as the lands that we know today as Norway, Sweden and Denmark, as are represented in this map. In fact, the king of Norway ruled over also significant portions of southern Sweden, in particular Västergötland, which we explored in an earlier stage, and also Skåne. These were under the rule of Norway up until the year 1000. But the Battle of Svolder changed the political landscape, the landscape of the area, because in fact Skåne would now go under the rule of the king of Denmark, and the king of Sweden took over Västergötland, the part of Småland there that we are talking about, and also Viken, which is today Norway, but ended up in the hands of the king of Sweden briefly. That was Olof Konung, of course. These two kings, Svein Fogbeard and Olof Konung, had made a compact together and they agreed to share the lands of the defeated king Olaf Tryggvason, but they also agreed to continue to Christianize these lands. And that's quite remarkable because they took over the religion of the defeated king, which is not common indeed. But they did that. They took over the religion of the defeated king and continued the work that Olaf Tryggvason, now dead, Olaf Tryggvason, began. Now we need to talk a little bit more about Olaf Tryggvason because he is the man who brought Siegfried to Norway. We talked about him in an earlier stage already, but Olaf Tryggvason, before becoming king of Norway, which happened in 995, before that he went to Britain, not for a touristic trip, but in fact for conquest. But when he arrived there, he converted to Christianity, and he was in fact baptized in the archipelago of Scilly, which is in the southwestern part of Britain, you can see on the map, and there a monk baptized Olaf Tryggvason. This changed the mindset of Olaf Tryggvason, and in fact, now he was convinced that he should return to Norway, but with the scope of Christianizing his lands where he would become king. He was the heir of the crown, of course. And so what did he do? He took with him a monk from Britain, and that monk was Siegfried, and they returned to Norway. Now, the sagas of Olaf Tryggvason talk about the return trip, and in fact, Olaf Tryggvason entered, and his boat entered in the famous Saltenfjorden, famous in Norway. It's near the city of Bodø, and it's a fjord in which is very dangerous, with big waves that can drown, that can make boats capsize. And so Siegfried prayed. This is what the sagas say. Siegfried prayed, and they had therefore a safe entry in the fjord. The boat did not capsize, and the future king of Norway, Olaf Tryggvason, could enter safely in the land. So Olaf Tryggvason became king of Norway and appointed therefore Siegfried to become the bishop of Norway, and gave him the task to Christianize his kingdom. Now, Olaf Tryggvason was king for 5 years only. He died at the Battle of Svorder, as we said. But Siegfried continued to live, and in fact continued to work, to do the work of Christianization under Olaf Skjøtkonung. So Olaf Skjøtkonung continued the work of the Christianization of his country, of Sweden now. And Siegfried, in fact, continued to move from Viken, where he was, the region there in Norway, southeast towards Västergötland, and that's where he is known to have baptized the king of Sweden, Olaf Skjøtkonung, and continued to go southeast, planting churches until he reached Växjö, where he planted the church here in the 11th century, and he is said to have lived the remaining time of his life until his death there in Växjö. A final note about Siegfried, which is worth mentioning, is that he is said also by Adam of Bremen in his Chronicles, a man who lived around the same time as Siegfried. He is said to have prepared the heart of a king that would be one of the most influential kings of the whole history of the Nordic nations, the Christian king Olaf II, this time of Norway, who became known as Saint Olaf because he died as a martyr. So that's also thanks to the work of Siegfried, according to Adam of Bremen, that this king would in fact be a great influence for Christianity in Scandinavia. So the life of Siegfried is a very important one to know, even though we don't know much more details than what I said, but it is worth in fact being remembered in the history of Sweden and of the Nordic nations by and large. I'm Cedric Placentino. See you next week for another stage of European Journeys.